There's one professor in Hawaii who has written an amazing book that has gone around the world and is now published in 44 languages. His remarkable story about how he accomplished this is going to come right from him today. We're going to welcome Ken Schoolland, Professor Ken Schoolland, and his daughter Ken Lee today. I'm Malia Zimmerman, and this is News Behind the News, and look forward to an exciting half hour with you on your book. Thank you for coming today. And I roped Ken into bringing his daughter, Ken Lee, because she has been with him on so many camps and in seeing how, from your childhood, your early childhood, on how this book has bloomed into what it's today. So you can give all the secrets on your dad.
The book is dedicated to Ken.
And there you go. How often do you get to hear from the author and the person he dedicated it to in one show, right?
Yeah.
Well, Ken, first of all, tell us about your book, Jonathan Gullible, the Adventures of Jonathan Gullible, right?
Yeah. I originated the idea when doing some radio commentaries for KHVH a long time ago, in the early 1980s, when it was an all-news business radio station, and I was doing radio commentaries, and just 90-second spots, and it didn't seem to be too much response. I mean, who wants to listen to an economist on the air talking dry stuff about the issues of the day? So I wove it into a story. I had just read Gulliver's Travels, and I thought that The Little Prince was great in conveying very profound and interesting ideas in a fun and enjoyable way. So I started doing these episodes of The Adventures of Jonathan Gullible. And instantly there was a big response all around town, and I thought, well, this was terrific. And actually, we might show this picture here that indicates some of the origins of the book. Originally, the book started off on radio with KHVH radio, and it was quite successful. It was Sam Sloan who thought that this was really good should be an educational tool in the islands here, and has since won a number of awards. So we then started publishing the book, and it became very successful internationally. It was just being published here in about 1989, and the Iron Curtain fell, the Soviet Union broke apart, and I thought this was a terrific opportunity to introduce free market ideas to Eastern Europe and Russia. And so the very, very first international edition through the International Society for Individual Liberty was in Holland, but the second one was in Russia. Within 2 months, the 5,000 copies had sold out. It was a very big success there. People were, in fact, it was the first free market book published in Russia, and then throughout Eastern Europe eventually. When publishing that one, my friend Dmitry Kostigan, who was publishing it, asked me to write an introduction that would say something about property and taxes, something that was very unfamiliar in Russia. So I wrote the introduction to that book, which has later become the epilogue in all subsequent editions, and now it's been put to animation. It's also on our website, jonathangullible.com, in 36 languages now. Just the philosophy of liberty, as it is, which spells out the basic premise of the book.
And I've also seen it on YouTube, right? The
That's
philosophy
right.
of liberty, right?
That's right. It's all over, and probably quite many thousands of viewings and so on. And it's a popular introduction to the ideas behind the book. And the book itself is something that, well, it not only makes economics interesting, but it's something that shows an appreciation for the value of free markets, something that's sorely lacking in a lot of the other economics books. And it's taken off throughout Eastern Europe, and now, as you said, in 44 languages. Actually, online there are about 10 more languages that it's been translated into that we have online that it hasn't yet been published in, but we will have them very soon, such as French and the Hindi edition and so on. But we're fortunate. Just recently, we've had the Arabic edition published in Jordan, and we have a commentary edition that was produced in South Africa, which has now been republished in Mongolia, in Sri Lanka, in Bulgaria, and a number of other countries. So now the story itself is something that takes some very common ordinary things and shows people sort of the irony of public policy. For example, Jonathan first comes to an island, and as he's scrambling ashore, he sees two men, burly men, dragging this woman off down the trail, and he tries to help them, but they brush him aside and say, "Out of our way." So he goes up the trail trying to find someone else to help him rescue this woman who's screaming out for help. And he comes to this clearing where a whole crew of men seem to be working around the trees. So he goes up to the supervisor and he says, "Well, come and help me rescue this woman." "Oh, don't bother with her. She's been arrested." "Arrested for what?" "Well, for threatening the jobs of all these men here." "Well, how could she do that?" "Well, as you can see, these men knock down trees by beating them with sticks. It can take about 100 men a good month to knock down a good-sized tree. But this woman came to work this morning with a sharp metal piece attached to the end of her stick, and she cut down a tree all by herself within less than an hour. Clearly, this threat to our traditional employment had to be arrested." So Jonathan is befuddled. Well, all these men have arms and legs and brains. Can't they do other things with their time if they were more efficient at cutting down trees? I mean, they can make tables and chairs and houses and boats and stuff. "Oh, no, the purpose of work isn't to have produce goods and services. The purpose of work is to have secure and unchanging employment." Well, Jonathan learns his first lesson about this island, that a lot of times public policy gets in the way of innovation. And I indicate that in the first chapter, that innovation is often very important to the production of wealth and goods and services, but it's resisted by those who don't want change. And so there's a number of stories along that
You pretty
vein.
much just summed up Hawaii politics and Hawaii government
It's funny
and
that
Hawaii
you should
public
mention
schools.
that, because when people in Poland read this, they said, "How long were you living in Poland in order to understand the politics here?" And I said, "Well, I wasn't really writing about Poland. I was writing about Hawaii at the time."
It's so true, sad but true, right?
It's a very universal theme throughout,
Right.
because politics everywhere is trying to shape the way people live, and they do it often in a very bizarre way.
Ken Lee, what's your favorite story in the book?
Well, I'd have to say the toll tax is very interesting. It talks about this guy who's that Jonathan comes across, who's walking. Well, he's going through the town, but he's on his knees, and Jonathan's really surprised by this because it must be absolutely painful. The guy explains that there's a tax against people who are tall, because it's unfair that people are tall. Girls may prefer men that are taller. It's popular in politics. They're more likely to get elected and this and that.
Tell that to Mufi Hanneman and Neil Abernathy, right? That was a switch.
Exactly, yeah.
Right? But yes, uh-huh.
And so then they tax people who are taller, and so in order to get around the tax laws, this guy goes around on his knees. And he says, well, if I really want to lower my taxes, then I could crawl. And, it seems kind of ridiculous, but it happens so much that people change their lives to bend to the tax code. And so I think that it makes some great points.
Now, there's some really funny stories in the book where you just go, "Oh, that's just so ridiculous," but it actually is happening. What are some of the things, do you think, in the world that are happening right now with politics that maybe actually came true from your book, or your book was written about those things? Like she's talking about the toll tax. Maybe there's a cap and trade.
Yeah, sure. Well,
Trading.
what this so much points out is that people shape their lives to the tax code, not necessarily to what is rational for their own behavior, and that's intended by the politicians. They expect to be shaping people's behavior by taxes. And a lot of other ways. We've seen what I call moral hazard, where the government, by its interventions, encourages reckless behavior by trying to absolve people of risk in certain categories, and therefore we've had this huge boom and bust cycle that's been generated by the government's interventions with Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Federal Reserve System, absolving people, bailing people out, whereas if they knew that they were responsible for their own behavior, they would behave differently. They would behave much more cautiously and responsibly, I believe. Yeah.
So you've taken this book to different countries, and what do you think was your most memorable trip, in terms of, or one of your most memorable trips?
Probably this last summer in China. My wife organized at Northeastern University the first Austrian economics camp in China, where we had 100 students from the camp who were there to learn about free market economics. And they had a great time. But for the first time, they weren't just being taught by age-old professors lecturing one way about how Marxian economics was the way, the path of the future. They actually got to interact with discourse. And Ken Lee was one of the teachers there. We had 5 teachers from the Mont Pelerin Society. A lot of economics we were teaching, and ethics of free markets with Jeff Crawford. And we had a great time, a very week-long program. And Ken Lee, what would you say was the experience that you benefited the most by?
Yeah, well, I'm really lucky that I've been dragged along by my father to all these things, so I've been able to experience many different countries through the book. And well, I've taught at camps in China, Lithuania many times, the Republic of Georgia, and Poland. I mean, everyone is such a unique experience because they're all at different levels. Some have actually, they've heard sort of market ideas, but some have never even thought about it before. But it gets really lively and people act out scenes from the book. And, but yeah, I think Poland may have been my favorite because they weren't entirely new to the ideas, so they could really participate and engage in discussion about it.
So how does it work? Do you have people that translate for you, or are you speaking English and they all speak English pretty well, or?
At the camps, they're all in English, and actually their English is pretty good. At the China camp, maybe it was a little bit rough. I think they said that they understood about 70% of what we were talking about. But in Lithuania, where we have a large number of Belarusian students who are coming, their English is excellent. And we get into a lot of very topical issues, redistribution of wealth and policies with regard to housing policy and all kinds of things. But we find that this kind of story is a great way to introduce people to new ideas around the censors. For example, the mullahs approved the Farsi edition in Iran, one of the most closed societies in the world. And we found that it was also very easy to introduce in Urdu, two language editions in Urdu and in Sindhi in Pakistan, the Bengali edition in India. A lot of these countries normally wouldn't be so open to free market ideas, but they're glad to learn about it in a fun and lively and engaging way. And
a kind of a child story, or a young person's story, right?
It sounds that way, yes, but the first edition was published, I mean, a way of saying that it gets past the censors is the way the Hong Kong Economic Journal did for the business community. So sometimes it can appeal to the adult business community and sometimes to a very young audience. I use it in my university classes in economics, as they do at Santa Clara University, San Jose University, State University of New York, and in Texas. And in these cases in various other countries, they do so because it's a way of getting around the censors, I guess.
Well, and you've had parents who've come up to you and said that it's such a great book to read to their kids about. I mean, just to have these different ideas. So just a bedtime story. So it does, I mean, it was a bedtime story for me, and so, but at that point I didn't really understand it as well. But then you read it again when you get older and you understand more and more. So it can apply to
Dave Pendleton was one guy locally. You know, he was in the House of Representatives here. He said that he had let his he started reading some chapters to his son at school, and I mean at home, and then the next day he got a call saying that his son had been caught doing some extra reading during his history class. And so he went to talk with him and he says, "What are you doing? You're supposed to be reading studying the history." And he says, "Well, you know, I wanted to keep reading this book on economics." And he had to tell him, "Well, son, you know, you have to do your studies before you can have a treat like studying economics."
Learning economics, yeah. Well, maybe he'll be a future economics professor. You never know, right?
We've had some refugees from Cuba say that the copies that had been smuggled into Cuba were very helpful in introducing free market ideas and ideas of liberty to people in Cuba that later, when they fled from Cuba, that they came into touch with us, and they've wanted to send more books back, even if surreptitiously, in order to get around the censors, because it's a great way to introduce ideas in autocratic societies. You know.
Well, on that note, is it true that you've tried to donate books to the Department of Education in Hawaii?
Yes, yes. We've tried to make it available to the schools in Hawaii. And without any success with the Department of Education. We did have one school take up a set of the books, but I wasn't able to contact them afterwards.
So they're in China. You've gotten them into
Iran,
Muslim countries where they
Korea,
normally wouldn't be allowed.
Muslim countries,
and you smuggle them into Cuba.
Yes, that's right.
But you can't smuggle them into the Department of Education.
And you offered it for free, didn't you? As well?
Yeah, we offered it for free to the schools here, and
isn't that kind of why you actually started the book?
Yeah, it was intended to be an educational project here in Hawaii. And I've even approached the Booklines Hawaii, the publisher here,
yes,
I think 2 or 3 times, and they said there won't be any interest here in Hawaii, and so they declined to carry it. So
what do you think the reason is that it's so popular in Cuba and Iran and China and not in Hawaii? What does that tell you?
Well,
but it is, to be fair, I mean, it's in the private schools. Some private schools, right?
Yeah, and there's one guy, Gordon Kitsua, who has put it into most all of the libraries.
Oh, good.
And so it's available in the libraries.
And actually your website?
The website, jonathangaldo.com. Right now you can download the commentary edition at no charge, and we are reissuing the print on-demand book, which is going to be available right now at a good price. So yeah, it's available through Amazon and Borders and all the major distributors is going to be carrying it, but we're going to have troubles.
I remember I asked the guy from Booklines why he wasn't letting the Booklines, or I had written something about that, and he sent me a note about he doesn't have to publish it and he doesn't have to distribute it or whatever, and I said, well, I know that, but the point is, people probably would want to see it. I mean, it's all around the world, right? So. Yeah,
in fact, I thought that they gave a kind of priority to locally produced books, but I think there was an exception in this case. I think they just didn't agree with the philosophy and decided that they were going to make that decision for any potential buyers here. Yeah.
Well, that's okay. We'll just have to start another distribution company or something, or distribute it like Cuba did.
I might say that one of the great successes has been in plays. It's now been produced and performed in plays throughout Nigeria, through Kenya, and now just coming out in Slovakia. So I've had an offer just this last week in Colombia. They want to make it not only plays, they want to invite the local television actors to come in and do performances in the schools to produce it. And it's not just high schools, it's universities as well. And so, I'm even talking to some people about a full-length animation film about it. We had a start on that, but not great success yet. But one day we'll have it in the theaters as well, so it'll reach a broader audience.
So give me some more of the stories in the book that you think people relate to pretty well, or might have experienced in real life.
Well, there's the tortoise and the hare, for example. There's Davy in the story, which is actually a veiled reference to Milton and Rose Friedman and their son David. Davy asks a story to be read. It's kind of like an Aesop's Fables, the tortoise and the hare, where they're delivering mail around the island, and they decide to have a contest, see who could get the most customers. And the hare is very efficient, running all over the place, innovating with new ideas to get people to be more convenient for them to deliver mail, at lower prices, greater services, big smile and all that. And the tortoise is very, very slow. He can't deliver one letter in a week, but he gets all the service because he's able to go to the king and get a monopoly for the privilege of delivering all the mail on the island, and the hare is out of business. And these are labeled Lysander Spooner, the hare, after Lysander Spooner, who established the American Mail Company in the 1840s to compete with the U.S. Postal Service. And the U.S. Postal Service essentially passed Federal Express statutes to outlaw the competition. And that tortoise is named Frank, because the privilege that they gave to congressmen was franking privileges, that they could deliver their mail for free in exchange for the monopoly of delivering mail.
So you're speaking of Milton Friedman.
Yes.
So
Milton Friedman.
have you any news about him? I mean, he actually endorsed you, right? Or he promotes
That's
your
right.
book.
We've had endorsements from Milton Friedman, Steve Forbes, John Stossel, Walter Williams, Mark Skousen, quite an excellent array of free market economists who have found that it's a very good read. It's won a number of awards from the Foundation for Economic Education. It won the first Leonard E. Reed Award after Leonard Reed, who founded the Foundation for Economic Education for Excellence in Economic Education, and from the Foundation for the Freedoms Foundation at Valley Forge for Excellence in Economic Education, the Levy Award. Other awards from the Acton Foundation, from API, the Association of Private Enterprise Education. So it's won a number of awards, and I'm very pleased about that. And soon we'll have it in a theater near to you.
That would be good. We'd like that.
That's right.
Take all our kids, take all our school kids.
That's right. That's right.
So what you're talking about the tortoise and the hare, and the tall tax, and the wood chopping story. But do you have a personal favorite in terms of the stories that that he runs into, or the scenarios that he runs into?
Talk about the new ones you're thinking.
Oh, well, we have a new edition coming out, and we have 2 new chapters in this one. One is going to take up the theme that Friedrich Bastiat gave in his allegory about the broken window. And a lot of times people think that, well, destruction is beneficial to the economy. War is beneficial. If there's an earthquake in Haiti, it must be beneficial, because think of all those jobs that are created by repairing. Well, Friedrich Bastiat said that this doesn't, if a kid breaks a window, it's not good for the economy, the fact that the owner has to replace the window, because you have to think what he could have done had they not had to do that. They could have been making a new extension to the building instead of repairing the window. And so this is what is called the allegory of the broken glass, and that'll be in this new book. And also we have one that spoofs the Cash for Clunkers program recently to stimulate the economy. We call that in this book Cash for Codgers, which is another way of rejuvenating the economy by getting rid of something old.
Well, you've got, is that old people?
Yeah.
Oh, no. Okay, preview, right? Book preview.
That's right.
Well, you're talking about Cash for Clunkers, and that was, of course, the Obama plan to take back old cars and have people actually buy new cars to stimulate the car industry, which was hurting during the recession, right? Okay, so you're going to take back old people, huh? I need to see what they do with them. Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, you're talking about the new edition coming out. So what's the plan for that?
It's going to be...
And it's going to be in English, right?
In English, that's right. It's going to be printable in every continent, actually, so that it reduces our transportation costs. We're going to have it available in England for the European market, in the U.S., from California for the U.S. market. It'll be available in Australia, in Asia as well, and out of Japan. And this is all for the English one. And because it's print on demand, we can also adjust it. We can put in commentaries. We can put in new illustrations. We have some beautiful new illustrations that have been published in the Polish edition. And we are hoping to be able to adjust it to whatever kind of demand there is out there. But I'd also have to say that we have a nice addition. The International Policy Network has published 100,000 CDs for third world countries, in which they put the ideas of a free society, a number of books from Milton Friedman, Hayek, von Mises, numerous books, and they put the Jonathan Gullible book onto this as well. So
Oh, that's
100,000 copies of that have been distributed. We
Wow.
distributed all of these to all of the students last summer in China.
So
as
is
well
that
as
in
copies
English,
of
or
the
those
book.
are in different languages, depending on where they go?
The CDs are all in English. Yeah, that's right. Well, one day we'll have, but on our website, jonathangullible.com, you can download about 30 languages in multiple languages right now, the book, and we'll have more. The Finnish edition has been translated and it's available. The new Russian edition. So it's available in a lot of languages.
So when you've translated, there must be some funny things that have happened when you're translating. Has there been some odd things that have switched around? Or?
A lot of lessons that we've learned. Like, for example, the man who was doing the translations in the Balkans was Tomislav Kuzmanovic, a great human rights advocate. And he had some of his Serbian friends who knew Croatian do the Croatian translation. This was during, or just right after the war in the Balkans. And when I got to Ljubljana and Zagreb to find out, well, what was it like, how's it going, they told me, well, no one's in Croatia is going to read this, because you can tell the translation's been done by a Serbian, and the Croatians don't want to have anything to do with Serbian. So you have to be pretty careful.
Wow, yeah, you never know what lessons you'll learn, huh?
That's right. And we've had some language translations that were, the first one was done enthusiastically, but not very well. So it's not respected. So I had to have a second translation done, by an entirely new translator with some sophisticated credentials to get a good job done.
Yeah, you don't want the book to be trying to teach one thing and it actually teaches the opposite, right?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know of any stories where they've changed the story to the opposite of what it's intended, but it may get muddled.
Yeah.
Like there's one, the Latvian edition has a cover that it looks like a picture that looks suspiciously like Fidel Castro on the cover, and I don't know how that happened.
Oh,
but
my
in any
goodness.
case, I didn't have a choice.
That doesn't have
about
a place on your book, I don't
No,
think.
not too much.
Okay, well, this has been a very good show. Thank you for joining us today. And people can look at jonathangullible.com and also smartbusinesshawaii.com, which is the publisher of the book.
That's right.
So-
I have to give good, strong appreciation to
Credentials
Sam Sloan and Small Business Hawaii.
for being
also
the
support
publisher
from,
all the way along.
Grassroots Institute of Hawaii.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for joining us today. This has been News Behind the News. Aloha.